got so much to talk because right now there's so many new developments coming in. So first, let's get things started with Bernie Sanders. He went live on social media basically indicating that, yes, he has won. He's tired of the BS. He's tired of it. He told that to the New York Times, and he's telling it to everyone in the free world that he won Iowa, which is a fact. It is a solid fact. There's no debate. There's no conversation. It's over. It's done with. And seeing how the Iowa caucus was mismanaged by the Iowa Democratic Party, it is quite clear, very clear, with all the evidence and the hard work that the Bernie Sanders campaign did, especially with their own app, that yes, the numbers are in. He won Iowa. DNC, corporate media. Turns out Sneaky Pete failed. But that leads us into our first story. Hashtag Bernie won Iowa. Now, why am I saying hashtag Bernie won Iowa? Well, there's still final results coming in, but we'll talk about another story about what's going on with that a little bit later. Basically, where it's confirming that Bernie Sanders and his campaign won. Now, this took place this Thursday morning, and on social media, especially on Twitter, the hashtag Bernie won Iowa is right now becoming very popular. So as it stands, Bernie Sanders is ahead with the popular vote, and also, despite the claims of social media and the mismanagement of the numbers, he's technically ahead with the delegate count number as well. But again, seeing the ground game that he has done there, especially in Iowa, it leads back to something that we've talked about on Hardlands Media. Myself, Daniel, Paul, Kira, Laney, and everybody else. You have to have a bigger army diplomacy. And while it's quite clear, because there's another story that's going to go on about what happened with the aftermath and how the DNC and Tom Perez are going to react to this, I want to make it very clear that in order for us to successfully win these next coming primaries, we need to have a large army. We cannot let up. We cannot back down, and we cannot apologize. There's no need to apologize. The evidence is in there that Bernie Sanders has a political infrastructure and the political volunteers and delegates and people to really help him out successfully win this primary. But in order to do this, we cannot let up. We cannot back down, and we cannot give a single inch. We have to show up in mass, in numbers, and no matter what, we have to work with each other and communicate so that we can successfully take over the convention. And I'm just going to say this here for Hardlands Media. We have to have a 1 million-man army show up in Milwaukee. We have to be smart about this, plan for logistics, but we have to show up and let the DNC know that we're not going anywhere. So everybody who's watching, hey, make sure you're bringing enough food and water and, make sure that you're comfortable enough to be in Milwaukee because this is going to be a fight and we need to prepare for a fight. It's going to be like a medieval siege. So make sure you got everything you need to make sure that the DNC know that you're not going anywhere. We have to make this primary happen. We have to make everyone realize that they have to show up to vote. Your vote's going to matter. Don't be that person who says that they wish they could have helped because we have to make this happen. Well, with that being said, I got to stop doing that. Mm-hmm. I want to open up the floor to Paul and Daniel. Paul, why don't you take first?
Well, I think on some level we need to be a little bit careful saying super strongly Bernie definitely won because we've got a situation where we have optics now where folks who want to take the DNC at their word and trust what they have to say and put a lot of stock in the official counts are going to say you can't use Bernie's independent recount or his independent sort of evaluation of the caucuses at face value. He's biased. We can't trust what he has to say. And it's sort of like, well, you guys are biased. You keep demonstrating your bias. You keep demonstrating that you'll help anyone but Bernie Sanders. So it could easily become a sort of like he said, she said scenario. So I think we need to couch our language a little bit when talking about this because I think it is fair to say the Iowa Democratic Party botched this in a major way. The fact that there was this app that was associated with it, there was, mass confusion, rules changes day of. It was at the very least handled incompetently and bears a lot of markers of what you might expect if you were looking at a caucus that was handled with malicious intent against one of the candidates. But who's to say if it was malicious or incompetent or some blend thereof? And so we don't, without having that adequate information to say for sure, but instead having, look at Bernie Sanders' team. They came prepared. They came to count. They came to observe. They expected these type of shenanigans because it happens in Iowa every year. I think it should go with a huge to a huge vote of confidence for like, yeah, he really did have a lot of popular support. He really did have that. Now, I don't think you can take that up to
and
super centrist
right.
Democratic Party insider and be like, you need to accept Bernie's count for this state. But it at least informs what we're talking about going forward, which is really what's become important. The lawyers will get involved in Iowa. Recounts will happen. It's odd that it's the DNC calling for a recount and not a candidate, which is normally how that happens. But something eventually will happen with Iowa, and it doesn't deserve too much more of our attention until they give us anything more solid to reach on to.
So I don't think anyone's actually claiming in the Bernie camp that they should follow his numbers. We've been talking about how Bernie has had his own numbers and forced the Iowa DNC to do the recount that they're doing, that the national DNC is taking over. I mean, Bernie Sanders did come out with a video saying that he won. And in that video, he said, by the official numbers, not his own numbers, but the official numbers, I've at worst, and speaking in Bernie, have tied in delegates and won the popular vote by 6,000 votes, which is a very large margin, the first tabulation. That's, of course, the official numbers that the DNC has put out. That's the official Democratic numbers. It just was very good that he was there, his lawyers were there to make sure that this happened, because if they weren't, we might have different numbers that the DNC would be bringing up right now. Oh, he actually was Pete that won. Oh, the Pete's app said he won. But no, the DNC is now officially saying Bernie's winning the popular vote, and Bernie has always viewed the popular vote as the piece that matters, and he's tied in delegates. So if you tie in delegates, what's the next best thing to count by? Well, it's not the state delegates, which used to in previous elections have a lot more sway, but thanks to the moderate reconvening of how the DNC and the Democratic primary works, they really don't have any effect. It used to be in previous elections that the person who had the most state delegates could steal additional national delegates. That's not the case anymore. So if you're tying in delegates, whoever has the popular vote wins.
Right. And, I think we have to remember, because especially in this article, you can check out our show notes in the description box below, but it talks about how Bernie Sanders managed to build a large coalition of youth volunteers and people within the Latino community and the Muslim community in Iowa, and how they managed to really lead a very strong ground game and a phone banking game as well by reaching out to voters. And that's the thing. The Bernie Sanders supporters and progressives and independents that are for Bernie Sanders, I need to make this very clear. You cannot let up, not a single day, not a single minute. This is going to be a fight. And the only way you're going to effectively win this battle is by showing up in mass, by showing up and knowing the rules and rights and regulations of your state's primary, so that the DNC doesn't try and commit election fraud. Because guess what? They're going to try and do it in whatever which way they can. The only way it's stopped is if all of you step up and all of you have what it takes to really make it happen. This is the moment where we can bring in change. Now, I don't want to paint a rosy picture, but the only way we're going to have Bernie Sanders get the nominee is if we show up and Bernie Sanders wins all of his primaries. The only way he's going to win is if you vote. Your vote is going to matter. We have to bring in reform. The system that we have cannot last any longer. We keep repeating ourselves, but hear it again. We don't have Medicare for all. We don't have student debt forgiveness. We have a crumbling infrastructure. We're not dealing with climate change. People are just struggling to make it by with just 2 or 3 jobs, and it's still not enough. We have a system that caters to the top 1%. We have a political system that caters to the top 1%. Aren't you tired? Aren't you mad? Aren't you angry? This is the time where you step up and build that better future. And Bernie Sanders won Iowa. But we're going to be talking about the canvassing later on, especially with the recount. But we have to move on to our next story.